Hi everybody, welcome back to the Future of Our People video interview series. I'm Rachael Ball, founder of Engage and Grow Central Midlands, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Helen Jackson from Bush & Co. So first off, Helen, welcome. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Just to get us going, can you just tell us a bit about what you do at Bush & Co for our viewers? Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm Managing Director of Bush & Co, and Bush & Co is in the medical legal sector. And what we do is principally divided into two key areas, really. So the first is rehabilitation of catastrophically injured people. So where they've had perhaps a clinical negligence issue or personal injury issue, our case managers have a very pivotal role in helping return them ideally to as close to the life they were in before the accident happened. And then the other arm is our expert witnesses, which kind of does what it says on the tin, which is they'll provide expert medical opinion about individuals who have also been impacted, and they will be instructed by claimant and defendant lawyers in the whole of the legal process. Gosh,
okay, this is a first for me, so thanks for coming on. I've got so many questions.
It's quite
So with the expert witness thing, excuse my complete ignorance around all this, is that like on TV when you have a court case and somebody comes in and gives their expertise in whatever area that's relevant to the court case? Is that?
Yeah, but principally that's it. I mean, although TV is good at giving you a sort of skewed perspective of how it happens, and actually I think it's short of 3% of cases actually go to court. However, there's a lot that goes in ahead of that. So specifically, because you can get experts in all arenas, really, but our backgrounds tend to be nurses, speech and language therapists, we have some architects, we can have midwives. Right. So it's as broad as it's long in terms of ours being clinical specialists, but we don't have doctors included in that. We tend to be kind of nurse level and across. Okay. And what they will do is they will pass opinion on issues around liability, if something's gone wrong in the whole of the process, if it's a clinical setting, be it for or against claimants. Yeah. And then actually what we call quantum. So they will help to form an assessment of kind of the care needs from the individuals being impacted going forward, because sadly with some individuals the injury is so severe that they don't get to return to the life as it was before. Yeah. Whatever happened. And so they will set out all the different needs that they have, be it carers, be it equipment, be it accommodation. Yeah. You name it, they will cover all that and kind of speculate outwards as to what that means financially.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh. So first off, how big is your company? How many people do you have now?
So we have in terms of self-employed experts and case managers, so our associate base is approaching 200, and then I have 80 employed staff, predominantly based around sort of back office support of our case managers and the experts. There's a lot that goes in behind it to make sure that clients are looked after and customers are looked after in terms of the solicitors who we serve.
Yeah, of course. And I can imagine that there's some tough subject matter, like in terms of the actual what you have to deal with and what your employees have to deal with. It's not an easy ride, is it?
Absolutely, no. It's a really good observation, and actually there's a strength and weakness to that, because in terms of what we're driven by in our core purpose, everyone without exception is very passionate about helping those people who've been impacted profoundly. And I'm very privileged in that most people can see how their role directly impacts on the outcome of those people and help to essentially transform lives. Yeah. The flip side, as you say, is can be a very stressful situation, even to read about what's happened to individuals in the reports, and that's where kind of management experience, support and structure comes in to ensure that people's well-being is protected.
Yeah, and without going into loads of detail, and appreciate obviously there'll be confidentiality around this, but as a leader, how do you ensure that people have got that support that they need? Because you know, me reading the newspaper about some cases which I'm sure are, you know, similar to what you have to deal with, and I can't bear it, and I've got absolutely no connection to it at all.
So principally, funny enough, we just talked about it today. We mentioned our communicate session earlier. A lot of it is around communication. So knowing that you have at the first level your colleagues available to you, as well as your supervisor, at a very basic level. And I was going to come and talk about this in terms of COVID. That's become more challenging because when we're all in the office together, you could kind of, let's just have a cup of tea, let's take a time out, let's just chat this through. And obviously that's harder now. So we're kind of process-wise forcing a natural break in terms of people's diaries, what they do, how they spend their time, and taking that time out really, because it's as much about self-care as well. It's a classic oxygen mask, do yourself first ahead of others. So it's the talking to your colleagues, it's the making sure that people feel comfortable and safe to speak out when it's not right, and the general recognition that we're all in it together. And actually, do you know what? We all find it hard, myself included, from time to time. Means that people can speak if it's not quite so well. We have a mental well-being first aider, if you like, who's a stand that I can go to. There's a separate confidential helpline that's available to them. And then it's also about actually balancing some of the positives. So having fun, clearly nothing to do with clients, but outside of that arena, and balancing things out, like we did a rounded match recently at lunchtime, and it was hilariously competitive, and senior management team making bonkers of themselves, that sort of thing, just to have a bit of fresh air amongst it all is quite important too.
Definitely. I think things like that, it's quite easy for people to kind of poo-poo that sort of thing. It's so important. It's kind of almost like takes us back to being kids again, where you can get competitive, you can charge around. It doesn't matter if you're any good or not, but just kind of just letting off steam. There's a reason that we have that as part of the school day, and we don't as adults, which is really bad.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And what we've done is we've used Teams, no plug there, where we all kind of go on there, and so just take the rounds, which is a very simple thing. But kind of we went into two separate big teams, and that my operations director was, taking the rip out of me and how we were going to do, and everyone sort of piled in, and it's just very light-hearted. But you belong to something, and you're part of something, and there's a connection, a right connection, because it's something that I'm very wary. It's easy to lose where you've got hybrid working models where we have.
Yeah, that's so true. I think like connection, that in terms of connecting to their purpose, or your purpose, which is clearly a huge, and as you say, that's a real positive, but also like connecting to each other. So kind of almost separate to work projects, so that when the going does get tough in work projects, they've got that foundation with each other and with their managers and stuff. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's really interesting. What would you say, and this might be something that you've already talked about, but when it comes to your employee engagement and more broadly your people strategy, what would you say you're most proud of in terms of where you're at the moment, or what you've achieved?
Yeah, without question, it has to be that we achieved our biggest ever engagement score in June this year. We've been running it since I've been managing director, so 7 years. And I think the key to that is that we haven't kind of assumed a silver bullet. We haven't been complacent, and we've really evolved and recognised the changing dynamic post-pandemic. So we did actually, in all honesty, witness a drop from the year before.
Yeah.
And I'm all about going, okay, let's be honest, let's embrace this, let's make it safe to feedback on what we're missing and what do we need to do differently. In coming forward, and I'd say in essence, showing vulnerability to a degree as a leader, and saying, okay, we obviously haven't got all this right, what can we do differently? The biggest score that means a lot is actually trust, which jumped from 63% engaged to 82.
Mm.
And that, yeah, no, it was brilliant. And I think the key things that we did there were be open about communications, be it good or bad, and tell the story. And so we talked about the catastrophic injured people, but actually what we weren't showing so much, and we've got better at sharing, is the good news, where we've had feedback from clients, difference we've made, and be that not just clients themselves, but actually the solicitors who are looking after them, or even from the expert side, the difference it's made in terms of how professionally the people have worked across the business, and what difference it's made to them to make their life better. And where you see that sort of kind of purpose coming through, that's what you kind of get the engagement back up. That's brilliant. And as you say, that kind of connecting between what they do every day to the bigger stuff, those those positive outcomes that have changed people's lives. So you've got, you say, it's two sides of the coin, isn't it? Because you've got the really awful, really tough stuff to go through, but at the end, hopefully, you've got that lovely, good news feeling, which must be fantastic for them. Oh, it is, and it's a classic kind of what's your why. Well, for some businesses that might be harder if you're kind of selling widget. It's actually, I'm really lucky, and we've all got a why, and it's quite interesting when you speak to a lot of our colleagues. Certainly, naturally, all our clinicians have that direct experience themselves anyway. But personally, a lot, myself included, may have family members who have personal challenges. So my sister suffers from grandma epilepsy, lives in a care home, and has looked after by support workers and nurses. And so, we've got personal whys, but then along we've got our client whys. And there isn't anything more fulfilling than seeing the fact that you've positively impacted someone who's had a catastrophic injury. Easy in that sense. Amazing. As you've grown, so you've got, as you said, you've got kind of 80 employees now with a lot more expert witnesses and everything. What would you say the biggest, or one of the biggest kind of people challenges you've faced has been, and what did you learn from it? Because obviously we learn from every adversity once we figured it out. Yeah, absolutely. I think, aside from things like management bandwidth, because just for context, Bush & Co is part of a PLC called NAHL Group PLC. So obviously you have another layer of stakeholder that I need to be mindful of and respectful to, and I obviously have to deliver in terms of the financials. So as we grow, it's about balancing kind of cost containment with engagement, with sort of kind of management bandwidth levels that's reasonable. Right. And on the cost containment side, where we probably have learned a tough lesson is, clearly we've shifted from being a localized workforce to essentially, because of hybrid working, competing across the UK for similar roles, and actually pay has gone up as a result, and I think if we look back, we probably settled for someone in a role because we were keen to fill it because we were so busy, and weren't patient or challenged ourselves around, actually, is that package benchmarked in the right way now, because you're not just talking about local workforce. So so we were stung by that, in all honesty. So what we do now is, obviously, when we benchmark more accurately, because we always like to be above average for the roles as much as we can. But managers, it's really impressed upon them, is that, if you feel like, oh, they'll do, that's not the right answer, and we're just going to have to cope until we do get the right person, because you're just paying for it indirectly otherwise. Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting, and you're totally right. It's almost like short-term pain for long-term gain. It's going to end up coming back to haunt you, isn't it? What would you say in terms? I mean, first off, congratulations on the engagement score, because that's fantastic, and especially with that trust score is incredible. You must have been over the moon. What's your kind of next big priority in terms of your people strategy and your employee engagement particularly? yeah, so you can imagine, on the one hand, I was thrilled that we got that score. On the other, it's kind of, it feels like there's only potentially one way to go from here now. So,
no pressure.
So, yeah, exactly. And you know, we've got ambitious growth plans. So my focus going into even 2024 already is we kind of, as an SMT, come together, and we want our theme to be growth, and that's not just the, you know, the classic, obviously grow your profits. Of course, I have to do that, but the growth is how it's all going to come together in terms of profit, quality, care, engagement, and even the way we communicate. What's the growth? Where's that going to go in terms of how we're going to communicate with each other to avoid silo working, to avoid mistakes being made, really, to keep trust up and to keep that focus and the purpose. So literally in the next couple of months, what I'm going to be working on to involve not just SMT, but everyone really, is what's it going to look like? What is that growth going to look like? What's the picture? What are we going to measure? What's going to be rewarded? What's going to be important to us? And really not be complacent, because there's just no way that just continuing to do what we've done, even though it's been good, is going to preserve that level of engagement. And that will ultimately translate into business performance if that starts to slip, of course. So it's all about our growth tree and getting alignment around that at the moment for us. And it's, I suppose, which is about common purpose, of course, and measures.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that you're being proactive about this. I talk to a lot of leaders, and leaders come to me and they've had these big ambitious growth plans, and they, you know, but they haven't really kind of got a people element to it, and then they can't figure out why their growth plan, you know, they're not quite meeting their targets. And so it's a bit of an afterthought. It's like almost, you know, they come to me to help them catch up, you know, get the people side caught up. So it's music to my ears that you're you know, you've got that as part of your plans. And as I say, you've got such a great foundation with those schools as they are. So well done. Give yourself a pat.
I think it's probably fair to say my background's actually in human resources. So I've sort of come through the ranks by human resources and then into general management, and that's not all too common, but actually in a business like this, which is very, very people focused, it kind of worked really well. And it's actually it's not my doing, but having that as a kind of backdrop with the people and the direct link to other people looking after people, that naturally then produces a sound business result as well. So it makes commercial sense, is what I'm kind of getting at.
100%. I love it. If I was to ask you, or I'm going to ask you, if you could give leaders one piece of advice, you know, to a leader who's growing their team and really wanting to, they get about the importance of employee engagement and all that, what would you can have two pieces of advice if you want to, but have you got anything in particular that you tell them what to do or what not to do?
So it's two C's for me, I think. Top of this, there's all sorts, of course, but we've probably all heard it. So one is consistency. So I think that it can be all too easy to slip into being distracted by different priorities, different issues, different worries, different budgetary constraints, all the same, and maybe other things slip in terms of the people piece. So if you have a consistent approach to the messages you're enforcing, your areas of focus, the information that you're sharing, remind you of the goals, reinforcing the why on a consistent, clear basis, that's very powerful in terms of guiding the people. And then congruence. So for me, your values, your personal values, and the purpose of the business needs to align. And obviously, in addition to that, how you act must align. Because if all three don't, people pick up on it, and you lose your ability to inspire, engage, and lead at a basic level. So for me, it's about consistency and congruence.
Love it. Do you know what? Now you told me that you used to be in HR, I'm like, this is all making sense. We need more. We need more HR people in leadership roles in you know, as MDs. I think the world would be a very different place.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there should be more HR people. I've met so many fantastic HR people, and not too keen to necessarily make that transition or hit a bit of a hurdle. It's such a shame because there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention before we finish?
No, I don't think so. I think your questions have sort of covered the key things, certainly, that I'm thinking about in terms of engagement and future. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for your insight. So much that our viewers can take from there. And as I said earlier on, it's really interesting to speak to a leader who's involved in the with the having to deal with trauma and all that sort of thing, because it's a very it was lovely that you reflected on both the positives. Obviously there's negatives to it in terms of the challenges, but there's positives as well, and that sense of purpose and getting people behind that. Really, really interesting. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again.
And thank you very much.
To our viewers, I look forward to seeing you at the next Future for Our People interview. See you soon.